You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 565, Tsunkatse.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm John Krikorian, keeping the seat warm for Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we step into the ring with an episode of Star Trek. We use the wax-on, wax-off technique and go toe-to-toe with the morals, meanings, and messages, and ask ourselves if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Tsunkatse, the one where 7 of 9 finds herself the target of one of the most dangerous forces in the universe, the search for better ratings. John Krikorian, welcome to Mission Log. I am so glad to have you here. For anybody in our audience who does not know you, please let them know about your podcast and where they can find you.
Oh, absolutely, John. Thank you for that gracious introduction. My name is John Krikorian, and I have been a podcaster since 2018, and my show is called Trek Profiles. And it is not a rewatch podcast like Mission Log. It is not an analysis show. My show is actually about Star Trek fans. So each episode is a one-off interview where I sit down with a Star Trek fan. We deploy a Class 5 sensor probe into their Star Trek fandom. And we try to analyze with our sensors why it is we all love the show. And
very cool.
That's actually the reason I really wanted to do Tsunkatse.
Okay, all right, because that was the next question is, when we talked about you coming on to guest co-host an episode of Mission Log, we had this list of shows coming up, and you called it. You called Tsunkatse. Gotta know why. Because, John,
you don't even have to have listened to an episode of my show. If I was to say to you, give me a list of all the episodes that you think made a difference in people's lives, I would wager that you could probably come up with, out of the 940 episodes of Star Trek, probably 100 that are very, very common.
Yes.
And I said, you know what? I want to pick an episode that has never appeared on my show, or only very tangentially as a little aside. Not like Tsunkatse was the episode that made me decide to bring up, to go do martial arts or something. That has never happened. So I was like, I am not picking an episode that has been discussed on my show more than twice. So I said, Tsunkatse will be the one. It is awesome fun, and that's the one I want to do.
Fabulous. All right. I love it. And look, and if it did inspire any of you out there to become a professional wrestler, please let us know. Because of all the great stories of Star Trek fans finding their passion, maybe they became an engineer, maybe they became a doctor, maybe they went to the armed forces, whatever. But if you became a professional wrestler, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And speaking of hearing from you, John, if you would do the honors and let people know how they can contact us.
We'd love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics that you love. If you're not a member of the Mission Log Discord, what are you even doing? Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcast you love is to leave a 5-star rating and review at Apple or your favorite podcasting platform. And always remember, your comments could be used on the show.
Yeah, leave that 5 stars, whether it's Mission Log, and while you're at it, jump over to Trek Profiles, do the same thing. It's that easy.
Oh, you're so kind, John. And now, here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, Tsunkatse, we have a story by Gannon Kenny, and Gannon has very little in the way of on-screen professional credits. Just for this Voyager and an episode of 7 Days that aired 2 years prior, he is listed, though, as an executive producer on an upcoming film produced in Nepal called Shakti. Now, we have a teleplay by Robert J. Doherty, much more of a familiar name for us when it came to scripting. And we've talked a lot about Robert's work, most recently Riddles, and he's got several more to go before we're done with Voyager. Remember, at this time, he was the youngest staff writer ever hired for the series, for the franchise, in fact. This was directed by Mike Vehar, and another very familiar name in the production credits for Star Trek. And we just talked about Mike most recently when we covered Pathfinder. And like Robert, he also has several more Voyager episodes to go, and then he will jump over to Enterprise. And it is necessary to point out part of the genesis of this episode as a promotional crossover for another entertainment property that the UPN network had at the time, WWF SmackDown. That's right. One of our guest stars had not quite broken through to stardom yet, but rather was making a big splash in the world of professional wrestling. More about him in a moment. And also of note, according to the Nielsen rankings, this was the highest rated episode of the season. So something about that crossover stunt really worked. Now let's meet our guest stars, and let's say welcome back to two returning champions. Those would be J.G. Hertzler and Jeffrey Combs. And really, these two need no introduction, but it has been a little while since we last saw them. In fact, for both of them, this is their only Voyager appearance. J.G., of course, spent a lot of time on DS9 as Martok, but let's not forget some of his other memorable characters like Roy Rittenhouse in Far Beyond the Stars and Lass in Chimera. Jeffrey was most frequently seen as Weyoun, also as Weyoun, and also he was seen as Weyoun. And don't forget also, he was known as Kevin Mulcahy in Far Beyond the Stars, not to mention appearances as Brunt, FCA. Now, good for us, both actors will be back for multiple appearances on Enterprise, and well beyond that when you add in more recent shows like Star Trek Lower Decks. And our newest contestant, guest star, Dwayne Johnson, a.k.a. The Rock, as he is credited here, as the Pandari fighting champion. Not only is this Dwayne's one and only Trek appearance, it marks one of his earliest acting roles outside of professional wrestling. Best known for his time in the WWE, Dwayne is a third-generation wrestler and one of the most popular sports entertainers of all time. His popularity in wrestling paved the way for a hugely successful Hollywood career, starring in blockbusters like the Fast and Furious franchise, Jumanji, and Black Adam. Dwayne is also a former college football player and now a dedicated producer and entrepreneur with his own tequila brand and even an energy drink. While his Star Trek role was brief, it was a memorable crossover moment blending sci-fi and wrestling.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. It's their turn at last. It's the Voyager crew's turn for a close brush with Jeffrey Combs.
Prologue. An alien sports arena roars as one fighter steps into the spotlight to a mix of cheers and boos. Across from him, a Hirogen warrior enters. The bell sounds, and the fighters engage in a martial art, kicking and punching each other while glowing pads on their gloves and shoes light up with each hit. The Hirogen wins, knocking out his opponent, and the crowd goes wild, chanting Tsunkatse, Tsunkatse. And right there in the audience are Chakotay and B'Elanna, loving the spectacle. Act 1. Voyager is orbiting Norcadia Prime for the crew to have shore leave, while Janeway heads off solo in the Delta Flyer for her own mission in the nearby Pandari system, leaving Chakotay in charge. Later, Chakotay and B'Elanna discuss another upcoming Tsunkatse match, like the one they had attended before. As they walk together, they end up in the mess hall, where Neelix is cooking a Leola root ointment to treat his severe sunburn from Norcadia's two suns. Neelix listens intently as they describe the Tsunkatse match, while Seven dismisses the whole thing as crude and pointless. Tuvok and Seven are going to spend their shore leave studying a nearby micronebula. They don't need that kind of barbaric recreation. While on their shuttle, an unknown vessel disables their ship with a dampening field and beams over an explosive. Despite Tuvok's attempts to disable it, the device detonates. Seven awakens in a barracks filled with Tsunkatse fighters, including the Hirogen we saw in the fight earlier. A sleazy official inspects Seven, praising her Borg-enhanced physiology, and welcomes her to the world of Tsunkatse. Act 2. Seven immediately asks about Tuvok and is furious when the official, Pank, reveals he's severely injured from the explosion. He offers to provide medical care, but only if Seven agrees to fight in Tsunkatse. The Hirogen intervenes, suggesting a less dangerous blue match, since Seven's Borg enhancements make her a valuable newcomer. With no other choice, Seven agrees. Back on Voyager, Chakotay rearranges duty shifts so B'Elanna has the bridge so he can go watch more Tsunkatse. Neelix visits the doctor in sickbay to treat his allergic reaction to his own sunburn treatment. The doctor recommends indoor activities, enthusiastically suggesting a beetle larvae exhibit in the Norcadian Museum of Entomology. Neelix sarcastically weighs the options, bugs or brutal Tsunkatse match, and opts for the latter. At the arena, Neelix cheers alongside Chakotay, Tom, and Harry as two alien fighters face off. Chakotay explains the rules. Fighters wear Polaron disruptors, aiming to strike their opponent's sensors without exposing their own. The crowd roars as a rock-solid Pandari warrior steps into the pit. The excitement quickly turns to stunned silence when the opposite door opens, and 7 of 9 appears, looking uncertain as she faces her opponent. Act 3. 7 faces off with the Pandari. Chakotay, Tom, Harry, and Neelix watch in shock, yelling to try to get her attention. The Pandari brings on the smack talk, but 7 holds her own, landing several blows, showing her Borg-enhanced strength. In the end, though, he overpowers her and knocks 7 unconscious. Back on Voyager, B'Elanna tries to beam 7 out, but can't get a transporter lock. The crew realizes the match is a holographic transmission, meaning 7 is being held elsewhere. They return to the ship to update Janeway, who immediately sets course back to Norcadia Prime. Despite diplomatic efforts and scans, locating 7 and Tuvok proves difficult. 7 wakes up in the barracks, attended by the Hirogen, who has some notes about her performance in the ring, pointing out that her hesitation in delivering a final blow was her mistake, and he offers to train her to win the next fight. 7 refuses, saying she only wants to survive. Pank gleefully informs her that she's been scheduled for a deadly red match. When 7 refuses to kill, the Hirogen reminds her of the alternative. Realizing Tuvok's survival depends on her strength, she reluctantly agrees again. Act 4. 7 trains with the Hirogen, learning to trust her instincts and suppress any empathy for her opponent. He tells her Tsunkatse is not just a skill, but a mindset of survival and determination. Reluctantly embracing his philosophy, 7 becomes sharp, focused, and deadly, accepting that her opponent is now her prey. Meanwhile, Neelix returns to Voyager with some bad news on the diplomatic front. The Norcadians may say they are concerned, but they refuse to help locate 7 and Tuvok, as Tsunkatse generates substantial revenue. In astrometrics, B'Elanna and Harry pinpoint the transmission's origin, a heavily armed, massive ship that far outmatches Voyager. Chakotay sets course, though, and he has the coordinates relayed to Janeway, hoping that she'll be back in time for backup. Back on Pank's ship, 7 finishes her training. The Hirogen declares her ready, instructing her to rest. When she confides her fear of killing, Tuvok advises her to survive at all costs until rescue. Moments later, guards come to escort her to the pit. 7 enters, preparing to fight to the death, but when the opposite door opens, she freezes. Her opponent is her Hirogen trainer. Act 5. 7 and the Hirogen get ready to rumble, circling each other and discussing their situation. 7 accuses him of betraying her, but the Hirogen insists that his goal was to help her overcome her weaknesses. After 19 years of captivity, he wants an honorable death in the arena and wants her to deliver it. 7 refuses, but the Hirogen says that he would kill her if she hesitates. The fight begins. Meanwhile, Voyager confronts Pank's ship. Chakotay demands the return of 7 and Tuvok, but Pank cuts the channel and opens fire. B'Elanna identifies the signal generators transmitting the matches, and Chakotay orders to open fire on them. Just as Voyager's shields fail, Captain Janeway arrives in a shuttle and destroys the remaining generators, disrupting the broadcast. In the arena, the Hirogen continues taunting 7, but she launches a brutal assault, knocking him down repeatedly. As he lies on the ground, he urges her to kill him. She raises her fist for the final blow, but hesitates. At that moment, Voyager's transporter beams them to safety. They materialize in front of Tom and his security team. Exhausted, 7 declares the fight over and helps the Hirogen to his feet. Chakotay arranges for the Hirogen to rendezvous with his people, but before he leaves, the hunter gives 7 a trophy from the arena, one of the targeting sensors he wore during their fight. He also wants to know if she would have killed him. I don't know, she replies. Later, in astrometrics, Tuvok thanks Seven for taking his place in the arena. She responds that it was the logical thing to do. However, guilt and shame weigh heavily on her. Tuvok reassures her that feeling those emotions proves that she is much closer to regaining her humanity. The end. All right, here we are, John. We have arrived at the arena that is the mission log observations. We stand at opposite ends of the room from each other and dive headlong into our witty and fun observations about what is overall a fun episode. I think we'll get to that point in our wrap up, but there's a lot of action, a lot of energy here. I really like this teaser segment because I like that it's so kinetic. The lights are going, the crowd is yelling, the camera's moving just fast enough you can't really see what the aliens look like who are sitting in the bleachers, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of, I don't know who all had their hands on this script, kind of a Brannon Braga thing to do a short action-only teaser where in this, there are no words other than yelling and then Tsunkatse. And that's all the setup you need, right?
Well, John, I got to tell you, just this episode makes me almost as happy as that first fighter in the ring. I have never seen a guy so happy to be enslaved and forced to fight. I couldn't imagine being as enthusiastic as that guy. He's like, yeah, let's go, baby. He was just so jazzed. I was like, this guy's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Good stuff. The fights, I mean, it's immediately captivating when you jump in there with the fights. I mean, I am not in any position to adjudicate the technical expertise involved in, whether or not it was accurate or this is how the fighting is.
Sure.
But I got to say, just as like 90s TV stuff, it was great with like the flipping around and the jumping up. And, I think it was, the fights were just fun to look at. I really, really enjoyed that.
You can tell when the crew are having fun with their own creativity. When the camera gets to move around a bit, the lighting directors get to have some fun. I mean, you can just tell that even if they got the script and went like, why are we doing a wrestling episode? Yeah. Okay, we're going to make the most of it. And we're really going to flex our creative muscles here.
You see it. There was a beautiful little walk and talk with Chakotay and B'Elanna after they drop Janeway off. And it follows them down the hall through a couple of turns, going into the mess hall. And they didn't have to do any of that. But they kept it as one little take. And I thought, that's just glorious. They're just showing off their technical expertise.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because that was a great moment. Also, we get to this point where we go into the mess hall. Here's poor Neelix. And not only did they do the makeup, I love that bit that, his appliance gets that oddly burnt, shadowy look, But poor Ethan Phillips here, he's got the body language of somebody who has been badly sunburned. I know that because as a pale person myself, and I've been badly sunburned, like your clothes hurt when they touch you. And he's really got that down.
I couldn't believe he was wearing like that outfit the entire time. I mean, I'd be in there in a tank top doing that.
Yeah.
If they'd even let me in the mess hall.
That's a good point. We've seen his bare feet before.
Oh, goodness.
Neelix in a tank top, I think,
I didn't need to be seeing that, John, but thank you.
You're welcome. It's my little gift to you. Now, I always have to point out the food. Chakotay and B'Elanna are in there looking at the spread that Neelix has set up, and I kept going, I kept freeze-framing, like, what's in these bowls? Because it looked like Neelix is serving up, like, a bunch of unpeeled cloves of garlic, and then maybe, like, a plum or a crab apple, just some little red thing there. And then it looked like just a bunch of chow mein noodles, and Chakotay's just sticking his hands in there.
He's got his mitts in that thing, pulling that stuff out and just dropping it on his plate. No sneeze guard. I was like, this place is an ocean nightmare. This thing gets a D from the state of California.
Yes, at best. At best. I feel like we're all going to need to see the Toby the Targ little plushy animal.
Where is the merchandising on this, John Champion? Where is the Toby the Targ with the hull ablation repair kit upgrade available for an extra $9.95? I mean, I'd be buying that.
Yes.
I'd buy two. One to keep in the box and one to play with.
Keep one in the box. You know what to do. Exactly. I love some classic moments of the Doctor throwing shade at Tuvok, just taking down his person. Saying this is Seven, of course. It's like, he's terrible, pretty much. Terrible personality. You should hang with me. Love that. And then I love getting into the shuttle with them. And Seven and Tuvok both having this moment of the awkward silence that isn't awkward until they acknowledge that it is an awkward silence.
So I want to stay with the Doctor for a minute. I had a little bit of emotional EMH whiplash with the Doctor in this episode. He's all like, barbaric alien fisticuffs. How dare you? In that Picardo voice. Then at the end, he's like, oh, there's a Hirogen in my sickbay. Let me shoot it with a phaser. I was like, whoa, dude, where did you come from? He's like, I'm so elevated and so, ethically superior. And then he's like, oh, look at this guy. I want to shoot him. I was like, whoa, dude. He's able
to suspend the Hippocratic Oath every now and then, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a little too much for me. By the way, though, I just want to say the amazing aliens that were up in the stands. There's this one guy that has makeup that's like vaguely reminiscent of a Jem'Hadar who had on like this blue and red top with like a kind of a sash thing belt. I was like, I am fascinated with that. I want to see more of that guy. Wherever that guy, I want more of that. Yeah. That is like the most amazing thing. And it was just a guy in the stands. They didn't need to do all that. Yeah. Loved it.
But here's the thing. They're using that DS9 makeup. So it like a Jem'Hadar wouldn't exist there, so they're just going to pass by very quickly for you to go, wait, is that? Oh, I can't see him too well. And of course, back in the year 2000, we're watching this on our standard def TVs, and they're hoping you don't look too closely.
The biggest laugh line in the whole episode, and there was quite a few points where you can get a chuckle, but the biggest laugh line for me is when Penk says something like, and I neglected to write down exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, the Borg are not particularly popular in this quadrant. I was like, you think? Where's all the Borg fans at? I was like, what is happening right here with this?
So good, though, because you mentioned Penk, and I mean, Jeffrey Combs, just as soon as you hear the voice coming out of this smarmy little alien, it's just a perfect match, the embodiment of this character, and you know that he's up to no good, and you know that we've got to do away with this guy. Like, we got to get out of there at some point. But he's wonderful, and they ramp up the threat that Penk and his crew have right when we see Tuvok coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, he is seriously beat up.
Wrecked.
He's got he is not in good shape. And then I love Seven just doing exactly what Seven does, just throwing herself in there, throwing around the demands, and it's like that thing of the unstoppable force hitting the immovable object. This is Seven and Penk together.
What I thought was really clever about Penk, and I don't know if this is intentional, but his makeup just offended my sense of order in the universe. I just wanted to take some scissors and clip those little mustache things. I just want to clip it. Clip it. What are you doing with the thing? It's like every time he came on, it just offended my sense of like order in the universe, and I lost all sense of reality. Just every time I saw that mustache.
Absolutely, yeah. When we did the fight, Earl and I had some fun about taking the show to task for not really earning this moment of Chakotay being a boxer, and he's got this history, and like, of course, all you Voyager fans, you remember this long history of Chakotay being a boxer and loving the pugilistic sports and
the tattooed terror,
martial arts,
the anthropologist boxer, yes,
the anthropologist boxer, yes. But I got to hand it to him, okay, at least the show remembered Chakotay's long history as a boxer here. At least they get to give him the lines of what this is all about. So
yeah, and he gets to do the "you see Timmy" moment and explain to Neelix the rules, right? Because you have to have that part where he's like, oh, I don't understand this game. How does one play? And, you have to sort of do this obligatory thing where someone explains it. But I will say, since we're on the boxing discussion that happens in the cruise, that was one of the weakest parts of the whole episode for me. Was the little like boxing between Tom and and Harry. I was like, did they not have time to do like one more take of this?
Thank you, because
one more take.
It felt like sort of a poorly executed improv scene.
Yes,
that it was just like, just you guys play with something, come up with something, and then they rolled on it, and they should have done
do something funny and cute. Action.
Not that, please.
No, didn't want that. Didn't want that. Put it away.
cut back to the sickbay, and I love this bit of advice that we get from the doctor to Neelix. Talaxian homeopathy is no substitute for medical science. In fact, you're right, doctor, because no homeopathy is a substitute for medical science. So well done, sir. I applaud you.
Well, if you are suffering from extensive sunburn from a two-sunned planet, what you really should do, see, I think the doctor gave the advice to the wrong person. Neelix should be doing pleasant parlor games.
Yes, he should have. He should have. I have a question for you about the Polaron disruptor that Chakotay explains to everybody. Does it eventually kill the opponent, or does it just like disable them enough from taking too many blows? Like, I wasn't quite sure between a blue match and a red match what was actually doing the killing, because the little sensor, it seems to like shock them a bit and they sort of fly back against the wall. But then if we're led to believe what happens at the end there, like Seven would actually have to go in and pummel this guy to death. So it seemed like a sporting way to... It felt like laser tag for a moment. Like, you're not actually getting hit with a thing. It's just a little sensor that shows, like, yeah, somebody's gun, fired near you, and then you got hit, and that's it. You don't feel anything. This, I wasn't quite sure the logic of how that worked.
Well, John, you can't assimilate Tsunkatse from a book. You have to live it,
you
right?
Can't. You gotta live it.
The 30-something sanctioned
feeling.
maneuvers, you got 3 billion people on the pay-per-view. So you absolutely can do whatever you want to do. And I get the feeling that, however they kill each other in a red match, I'm sure it's going to be legit and the fans will love it who are watching this thing. I'm not sure that it doesn't seem to me like there's a referee out there, breaking them up or anything or calling fouls on anything.
True.
That's true. I don't think it actually matters. Now, I do think that if they hit the sensor, it's not just hitting the sensor, right? You saw the lightning bolts coming out, so it amplifies the effect, and gives them a shock or some kind of trauma to their body. But I don't think they actually have to do that. If they just walked in there and just, punch somebody in the face so hard that was the end of them, I think, so much, that'd be great. I think it would count. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the mysteries in this episode, how all that actually works. The other mystery is, why is Janeway going to the Pandari home planet? It's a planet. It's the Rock's home planet. It took me like 2 watches to figure that out. Oh, wait, she'd go to the place where that guy's from. They're rude, angry, and they don't like visitors. It's space France. What are you doing? Why are you going there? Do not go there.
And they're huge. Are they all built like the Rock?
Why would you want to go there?
Because
not only that,
I know.
She brings an entourage with her on the Delta Flyer. I was like, these people don't have shore leave. They have to go with the captain because she needs minions to escort her. I didn't understand all that at all, to be honest.
Nobody needs this.
Totally unnecessary.
Bad idea.
Awful.
Speaking of our Pandari champion, though, I mean, it is one of those moments, sort of like in Mystery Science Theater, where they just kind of stop the movie. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, boom, and here's The Rock, and you have to give him a big entry, and of course he does the eyebrow.
Yes.
But it works. Like, it's just, for the spectacle of it all, it just works. And I thought it was a great reveal then to show Seven as his opponent. Because, like, we know what's leading up to it, but, the shock on everybody else's face when they see her. By the way, I'm putting 50,000 Quatlus on Seven, no matter what.
100,000 Quatlus on the newcomer.
There you go.
By the way, that newcomer, who is very clearly not Jerry Ryan doing any of the fighting. This is something I often struggle with. I mean, I know, John, you're a big cinema guy. And as we sit here and record this today in 2025, there is no way to watch the original 1977 Star Wars. That cut is not available. Right. And I think there's a laser disc of it, maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure some Star Wars fans out there know that. And I think that's a crime because it's cinema history, right? It's something that's worthy of appreciating on its own. And one of the reasons that they gave, which I understand, for doing some of the revisions is that when they made that movie, there was no concept of people having VCRs and pausing. Yeah, so, some of the special effects don't hold up when you can pause and rewind and sort of zoom in on the little corner. I get fixing that stuff. This episode suffered from that. Because, man, that stunt double or stunt woman, she did not look like Jerry in the face. And it was so obvious on the rewatches. I was like, oh, God, I want to go in there with the computer and fix it.
Which, again, very clever to keep the lighting moving and keep the cameras moving because the choreography, the stunt choreography was very good.
Amazing.
But Yeah, but exactly. If you pause it, which we can all do now with streaming and DVDs and everything, yeah, they might have to do a little extra work on this if they ever upscaled it to 4K.
My favorite little bit is when she runs up on the ledge and he pulls her off by her ear and flips her across the thing. I was like, wait, what? When that happened, I literally jumped about because I'd forgotten about that little move. Because sometimes, you watch the episodes, but you don't watch them as intently as when you're preparing for this. Taking notes and looking for little observations. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I got to redo that. he threw her by her ear. Oh, my God. And it stayed attached.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was a very clever conceit to have the fighters hidden somewhere else and everybody else is just watching a hologram, which they may or may not know that they're watching a hologram. And I thought, this is great. Here's Star Trek in the year 2000 inventing the Fathom event, where, you pay your money and you go into a theater and, it's live, but it's live somewhere else, which is kind of cool.
I'm going to flip this up to another level.
Okay.
We were talking in the earlier part of this, and it might have been in the Patreon part of this, so forgive me for spilling some beans. But we were talking about how when we watch these episodes, our opinions change over time, right?
Yeah.
And I got to admit, maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, people paying to watch a hologram? Absolutely not. Like, no one would be doing that. I mean, I get people watching, like, the remote pay-per-view, but, like, people going to an event and sitting there. Do you know that there's an ABBA show in the UK that is all holograms?
That's all holograms.
I've been to it.
Right.
I have been to it.
Yeah, and I heard it's remarkable.
Yeah, I was waiting in line to go see it with my wife. I turned the guy behind me was like, "Oh, I'm so excited to see this." I turned around. I was like, "So you seen the show before?" He's like, "I've been 16 times." And I was like, "Whoa, you must really love ABBA." But I mean, it's all holograms. There's nobody there.
Wow.
There's nobody on the stage. It's a light show, bro. And people are going and paying for like upcharges for fancier seats and all kinds of stuff for holograms. So
incredible.
After going to that show, which I did last summer, and if you are, even if you're not an ABBA fan, as a technical achievement, it's worth it just to go. So I do give it a hearty recommendation. But of course, it is spectacular. I do think there's a little bit of uncanny valley on some of like the close-ups, if you know what I'm talking about, because they have the heads magnified on these side monitors, and they're like 30 feet tall. They look a little weird, but overall, fantastic experience. After having that experience, I totally think people would go to that, even if it was a hologram, because there's all the excitement, of all of that, which, by the way, just want to point out, there's no pre-show. There's no announcer.
True. That's true. Yeah.
They literally just come out and start duking it out.
You're just in there, and here it is.
And it's just, and everyone's jazzed coming in. I was like, wow, what an environment. What an atmosphere for like a show that's not actually really there.
That's hilarious. See, what you don't see is everything sort of behind that arena that those people are in. There's, the Jumanji, not Jumanji, Jumja stick vendors.
Sure.
There's the, somebody selling ale of some sort. There's all the other stuff around. So they get to do all that. Then they come into the arena, and then they get to
grab a Gormagander kebab and, your pint of Tranya or whatever, and you walk in, sit down, have a blast. Now, I didn't see any food in the stands. I'm gonna call it now. In my head canon, there's plenty of food. There's plenty of food. It's there. It's there.
Yeah.
I see that guy in the blue and red with the Jem'Hadar makeup chomping down on a Gormagander kebab. Totally happened.
Yes. Now, I love our guest stars here, and of course, we'll get to that in the wrap up. But I think JG is such good casting here because, we've got all these big guys doing the fights, but he is able to dial that in to such a point of intimacy. And of course, with Star Trek fans, as soon as we hear JG's voice, as soon as we hear Jeffrey Combs' voice, we just go, oh, okay. I know who these people are. I know the kinds of characters that they play. But JG to do this, like, tough guy with a tragic story, but also to be the tough trainer for Seven, I feel like he hits all these notes, but especially in those intimate scenes, these close-up scenes with Jerry, with 7 of 9. Wonderful stuff. And I also love the additional layer to everything that's going on here. Not just bad enough that these are people forced to fight to the death, but that it's all about ratings.
Yes.
And my note here is see also The Running Man, because there's a lot of shows you can connect this to, but The Running Man I thought was an apt one.
Yeah, I mean, they put Berman in the show, right? He's coming in like, what are the ratings? I had 3 billion people watching this episode, right? And, the ratings are up, the ratings are down, more of this, less of that. And, you think that's got to be very self-referential. By the way, I did think that there had to have been an enormous chuckle for me because in the episode, one of these little lines that I just sort of wonder what was going through the writer's mind when B'Elanna says something like, the Borg wouldn't know how to assimilate a theme park. And I was thinking, Star Trek The Experience, they did assimilate it. They did it.
They did it. Oh, my God, you're so right.
And so I had to stop watching the episode right then and there, and I had to go on to find out the dates. So this episode aired in 2000 sometime.
Yeah, like January of 2000.
But the Star Trek Experience existed, but they were doing the Klingon show at that time. They hadn't yet switched over to the Borg show, which they did in 2004, if memory serves. It was later.
I think that's right.
And so I was like, I had to see, like, were they just about to launch the Borg show? Was that like a reference to something? I was so excited. But I was like, that made me laugh. I really enjoyed that.
So close. So close. I want to mention one other thing about JG here real quick, is that on the second time around, this line that he has, that he says to Seven, I know your opponent, I know his weaknesses, was great. It was the first time I'm watching, and of course, like, yeah, all right, I don't remember the details of the episode. I don't remember that he's the one that she fights. Then watching the second time around, it's like, oh, I love it when you know that an actor knows the subtext of what they're saying in a moment like that. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful.
So I had a thought on that, John, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. So maybe we can talk it out for just a second. But I'm wondering if we were doing I've never seen Star Trek before, and we were showing them this episode today in 2025. I just have a feeling that a lot of people would just clock, that's the guy. I think because we're just in a different era where people are sort of used to that sort of, surprise. And,
Yeah, you're waiting for the twist.
Yeah. I don't think it would play as well today. But I mean, for the 90s, I think it was great.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm not sure, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I'm leaning that way.
Yeah, I agree. I like how the Hirogen becomes sort of the Mr. Miyagi. I'm glad that you gave us the wax on, wax off.
I had to put it in, John.
At the beginning. Yeah,
I texted you before we even did the recording. I was like, if you don't put a wax on, wax off joke in the recap, I am doing a wax on, wax off somewhere in this thing.
Yes. Yeah. Got to point out that I feel like the damage makeup, we talked about Tuvok going through the ringer and how rough he looks. But then even Seven, you see these little bits of kind of Borg tech popping through her arm, and that's rough. But it is Seven of Nine, and she is our most glamorous character. So even though there's all the battle damage, like the hair is just sort of mostly in place, except for a tiny bit.
Space Aquanet, bro.
It's still TV. Yeah.
Space Aquanet. Yeah. It's the hairspray of the past and the future. It keeps everything in place. Flipping around 27 times. She's got a little bit out of place. Totally get it. And I'm totally on board with that. By the way, if I was a fly on the wall, as the writer is writing lines, when he said something like, when B'Elanna says something like, they're approaching the alien ship, and she's like, they're out of our weight class. And I was like, oh my God. I bet he was like chuckling as he wrote that one down. That's the kind of thing where they're like, put that one in the script. I was like, damn you, sir.
Yeah, I noticed that too. And I was like, oh, come on. Not everybody, just because you think you're being clever as the writer here, not everybody in your crew speaks the way that you think they should speak to make this joke. Yeah, don't do that.
It did spur a thought for me though, John. Which is, and this is a little bit more serious topic. I mean, maybe we want to save it for later, but I did note that they don't seem to have weight classes in Tsunkatse. They don't have a gender divide. There's no men's or women's thing. It's mixed. It's just two people and just go for it, right? It's whatever happens. Yeah. And I thought, wow, if you were to seriously play the tape out, right, and put yourself in the position of Pink, as morally reprehensible as he is, right?
Yes.
How could you even come up with any sort of dividing line? I mean, some of these aliens have like turtle shells, some of them are more squishy and soft, and some of them have like this, super strength. I mean, there's no way.
Some of them have Borg implants.
Yeah, Borg implants. I mean, you just put them in there and let them go at it, right, and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's literally all you could do, because so much of fighting today is, trying to match up people where you get a good fight for the entertainment, right? And they're not. And you want to make sure they're somewhat evenly balanced. Not in this. It's like, just go for it, man. Just put them in there and have at it.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's very egalitarian in that respect, but yeah.
Did you think the Hirogen was going to break her arm at that one point where he has her in that lock? I was like, oh my God. Like, if he coughed, I think it would have went snap and like came out of its socket right there.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's like the testament to the fight choreography and the quality of the stunt performers and the quality of, what JG and Jerry are doing at the same time, too, is that they keep it moving and they actually do ramp up the danger quite a bit. There are moments there you feel like, oh, that would actually hurt. This actually looks more dangerous than real quote unquote real wrestling.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was glorious. The one thing I do appreciate about JG in this one is he did have that physicality. Walking in, and you could just when you're rewatching the episode, when you see him first come in the arena, he's walking bored. He's not like that first guy who's coming out with big smiles, like, yeah, look at me, right? He's coming in, he's like, oh, this again, he's totally happy. Right. But the thing I really liked is how his voice never gets above a 5 at a lot of points.
Yeah.
Because if you go to Martok, it's modulated all the way, right? It's all that, right? There's none of that in this performance. It's just, it's almost sedate in a lot of places, very low, kept close to the throat. I really like that. And, there's a few points where he does something different, but I think it showed he understood the assignment.
No, it's interesting. He's playing the age and he's playing the tragedy of the character at all times. He's really locked in on who this guy is. I do have to say, I don't think it's a very Star Trek message, but as we wrap it up here, it's okay, when in doubt, you just got to shoot your way out. No matter if you're outclassed, outgunned, if you're a Voyager and there's this giant ship in front of you. What I like, though, is they hit them where it hurts, which is in the ratings. It's in the broadcast platform. We're actually going to take you out that way, just to make you angry and distracted. And so
I love the little special effect of them blowing off the little transmitter thing.
It was great. Yeah, fly away. Yep, good effects. I did wonder, why are we making Tom go to the transporter room to beam up Seven in the Hirogen? Because he was actually flying the ship at that point, and they are being fired at that point. So Chakotay says, Tom, and he runs away. What are you doing? There's a whole security crew down there.
There's people down there who know how to do that.
Yeah.
And if there's not, that's a screw up. So if you want to make up headcanon, which we often do, you could say, there were so many people that were, caught on shore leave and didn't get a chance to get back to the ship. Maybe you could do something like that. I don't know. You could make up a story if you really want to. But it doesn't make any sense. I mean, we see this sort of thing in Star Trek all the time, John. And, I will divert on this for just a second, which is to say, how many times in Star Trek have you seen something like, we have to pilot the ship through a very dangerous circumstance? Well, Captain, you're the or, Rando number 1 officer, you're the best pilot on the ship. Well, wait a minute. The person you put in the chair who does this full time is not the person you trust when the cards are really, when you're really in jeopardy. That's a failure of leadership. Why have you not trained this person? And even if we are to accept that in this case, Tom, right? Why is there no one down in the transporter room? Even if we are to accept that Tom is the best transporter person, how many hours has he logged doing transporter stuff in the past year? How up to speed is he on that equipment, right? Is he doing this every day? That is something that always takes me out of the episode. And whenever they do this in Star Trek, it's something that drives me crazy. This is because little side thing, I'm a pilot. And one of the things pilots, in my personal life, I don't do it for a living, but one of the things pilots always do is you're worried about your hours. How many hours do I have recently? Am I current? Have I been training? And it doesn't matter if you're a 10 million hour pilot. If you haven't flown in a year, you're dangerous. So it's just something that comes to my mind every time I see stuff like that in the show. And so here they got to send Tom in a mission critical moment when seconds matter, run down to the transporter room and do the thing. Makes no sense.
Oh my God. Yeah. It doesn't make sense
at
all.
They call up Penk and they're like, give us our crewman. He's like, I'm sorry. I'm holding so many slaves. I have no idea who you're talking about. He's literally like, dude, my roster, I got pages and pages. I know.
Well, I love that bit that he can't be bothered with it, but his first line and all of that is, this is not a convenient time.
And would you like to leave a message?
Yes. He's so, and I feel like it's only Jeffrey Combs that can get away with that kind of thing. Those are lines that are written for his particular talent at delivery,
he just absolutely delivered it. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have a kind of an in-universe question here, though, that bothered me a little bit.
Okay.
Voyager, since the last time we have encountered the Hirogen, Voyager has taken a fast forward or two in the quadrant and skipped, several thousand light years or whatever. I mean, not several thousand, but a lot, when the Doctor announces that we have found, Chakotay announces that we have found some Hirogen about 3 light years from here, and they will come pick up this particular Hirogen warrior and take him back. I'm like, first of all, how did they get that far out there? And second of all, if they are actually that far out there, how would they even talk to you? Like, that if you're getting some random rogue bunch of Hirogen that have strayed this far away, they would just as soon kill you. And probably not want this guy back anyway, who's been gone for 19 years. So probably not a great idea.
No, John, I have come to a different place in my life now. I'm serious.
Does it keep you up at night?
When I was younger, I would think like, how do I resolve this? And how does that actually work? And then I think, what? I don't think Star Trek has ever been interested in in-depth, meticulous world building and keeping track of the maps and where are we now and how many light years is this from that. And, I know that there's fans out there, and I love you guys and gals who do this stuff. You're trying to reconcile all this stuff and make like the single unified timeline of all things Trek and exactly how far is Vulcan from planet Earth and, how far can the transporter actually go if you want to beam somebody. Yeah. Good on you for doing that. I got to say, I've lost all interest in that stuff at some point along the way. Just give me a story that somewhat makes sense with people who are behaving normally and doing like reasonable things, and I will do it. The one thing that does freak me out is when we have characters doing things with saying they wish they had certain technology that they don't have, which we had at the time the show was made.
Right.
Like Neelix walking around handing people pads with their letters from home.
Yeah.
Like in this episode, right, we got examples of that too, right? Like, Seven has to pack all that stuff in drums. They got a replicator, but no, I better bring all this stuff with me, right? There's our one favorite little tool. That's totally fine. I get that. We all have our favorites, but man, you got a replicator. You don't have to pack all this stuff, but she does anyway. Okay. That's just how it goes. Yep. So, I just try not to worry about this stuff too much anymore.
Yeah, that's why we have Dr. Trek, Larry, and Imitrek to worry about that stuff for us.
Absolutely. So, absolutely.
Yeah. As the episode winds up, I got to say, sometimes Voyager just hits right with these intimate, personal scenes. And I love it when you can take two dispassionate, non-human, at least not fully human characters like Seven and Tuvok, and have this moment of compassion. Tuvok is showing compassion in the only way that he knows how, which is unemotional, but he's so right. He so hits us right to the core. And I love it when Star Trek gives us a moment like that. And that's all I can say about it. Lovely scene to reaffirm humanity through this feeling of guilt and shame and remorse. Not always the most positive feelings to feel, but in this case, for her to acknowledge it, to sit with it for a moment and go, that's okay. Really nice to see.
Oh, it was lovely. I mean, that scene at the end where, you have Tuvok, the Vulcan, explaining humanity to Seven, who it's an open question, and you can debate whether you want to call her a human or not as a liberated Borg. What does that actually mean? Right. Is she human? That's something she's wrestling with, and there's not really an answer yet. I think eventually we get there, but she turns out to be her own thing eventually, I guess. But I think that that's just such a beautiful thing, is that they're talking about humanity, and neither of these people are really humans as we recognize them. They're kind of something a little different. And I just thought it was a really, really, really lovely. I will join with you in that.
Is this really the first line in The Rock's acting history? Or is it the first line in The Rock's eyebrows acting history?
So, John, there were a few things that jumped out at me in this episode, and some of it is mixed in with my personal stuff. So I just want to offer a few things, and maybe we can chew on it together and see which way we want to go with any of this.
Yeah.
It took me, I think, to my third watch through that I realized that none of the fighters have names. No one in this entire episode refers to any of the fighters by names. They are always the Pandari fighter, the what was it here? The Pensargan, the Bendali. Even our Starfleet people are using those names.
Oh, yeah.
And I think to myself, that is not how it would be. It just would not be like that. But I think that that's part of and I almost feel awkward saying this, the dehumanization of all those non-humans. It really is, they're fighting for our entertainment. They're fighting to the death for our amusement. And so we cannot give them the honor of a name.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting because it's sort of like Pank treating them like livestock.
Yeah.
And, you don't get too attached. You don't give them names. You just keep them in the pen and you feed them and train them enough so that they can do their jobs. Although it said he seems to be going back and forth given the amount of time or the amount of effort of keeping somebody in the fight because they're popular versus, let them get killed off because that too will bring in ratings. And I think about we have this sort of popular idea of the Roman gladiatorial fights where, all right, these are people fighting to the death, and the emperor, just by raising his thumb or lowering his thumb, can have them killed or saved. Well, to all the people and all the effort and time and money that they're putting into these gladiators who became wildly popular, you don't want them to die.
Yeah,
you don't want them to die that fast.
That's not a successful long-term business strategy.
Yeah. They do have names, and they do have sort of the way that we look at sports stars today. And from what I understand, it's not the same with every situation, but a very similar thing was happening in the ancient world, where you had these gladiators who were very well known, and people knew their names, and they probably collected information about them. I mean, my God, they also this is disgusting, but sold olive oil that they scraped off their skin.
Yes.
Because that, along with the sweat, was, an aphrodisiac. It was, a magical sort of medical purpose that they have. Certainly don't want to know about that, but yes. But you want to keep them alive, I guess, until it's more valuable that they're not.
I mean, how often could these red matches be?
Yeah, right? It can't be too much. You got to think it's blue match on up until a point that you gotta goose the ratings a little, maybe.
I guess, but I wondered about how all this worked because Pank, and I realized television budgets couldn't see fit to give them a proper gym. I mean, they're exercising and doing all their stuff in their holding pens, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of the whole thing, right? To sort of keep them in there. They didn't seem to be separated too much. They were all just sort of in there. And how much of their lives would be affected by coming out of the ring? Now they're going to sit next to these people and eat and just sleep. I'd be afraid of being shivved in the middle of the night by this guy who felt like I treated him unfairly in the ring or something like that. I mean, the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became with the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who is actually an MMA fighter. Oh. And I have been to many an MMA fight. I live in Vegas. We have UFC here, and there's other ones besides that. I've been to those. When I went to see my friend actually in the ring, it was a completely different experience.
Really?
Completely. Because I can go to a match and watch it and enjoy it and see what goes on. When someone that you personally know is taking a knee to the face, it's a different experience, John. So when the cast, when they had that moment where it's like, Tsunkatse, and then all of a sudden it's like 7, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. And, they're kind of calling us on our BS. Like, this is okay as long as we don't know who they are. Forget the slavery angle, right? Just put that to the side. We don't know who these people are, and they're beating each other to death in red matches. The Starfleet people had to have known that. I cannot buy that they did not know about these red matches going to see the Tsunkatse stuff.
I had a big question about that, about our enlightened, ethical, advanced 24th century crew just being really into this. And I get it that maybe there is this element to it where, you let Chakotay have his monologue about, we'll see, it's really this, elegant sport and martial arts are about training the mind and the body, etc. Yeah, but these people are also beating the crap out of each other. And if you stick around long enough, somebody's going to die. So, and I know that even in our modern world of sporting, and there is still, boxing and wrestling, these other direct content, MMA, like you just said, there are rules, there are guidelines, there are ways that people try not to get hurt, but you do it long enough and you're going to get hurt. And there is something about that makes me very uncomfortable, treating it as light entertainment.
Yeah.
You know?
My kid is in high school. He had to pick a sport. And we put some guardrails around what he could pick. And he ended up picking wrestling. And we go to those matches. And, it is not comfortable sometimes to see what goes on. I mean, he had a foot injury that laid him up for a year as a result of that.
Wow.
Had to have surgery on his foot. Yeah. I mean, it is a serious thing. So I think that I probably would have had a very different reaction to this episode had I seen it live. Because there's parts of Voyager I did not see live. I did a grand rewatch a couple of years ago, and I saw it all there. I am pretty sure I probably would have had a much more relaxed sense of this episode back then and sort of had it more as light fun. But after seeing my friend do his MMA bouts, after seeing what my kid dealt with his wrestling injury, I have a very different reaction to this episode than I think I would have had.
How could you not? Yeah, exactly. And obviously with the tie-in to WWF, later WWE, there is this sort of indication to the audience, like, this is show, this is spectacle. But because this is in the world of the reality of Star Trek and the reality of what's happening in this part of the universe, given the parameters kind of around the story that we're telling here, then they have to crank up the threat. They have to crank up the danger here and what is actually happening to Seven. And of course, you have to introduce somebody like Pink, who really is pulling the strings and really has no ethics to be bothered with in this case. It really is just that these people are slaves. They are cattle to some extent, and you're only as good to me as long as I can make a profit. And if you don't make enough of a profit for me now, well, I can make a little boost in the profit by having you killed off, and you get replaced by the next character, the next thing.
I mean, maybe this belonged in observations, John, but I don't buy for a second that those people watching the matches didn't know they were slaves.
Yeah.
I just don't buy it.
Yeah. And they do pay a little lip service to the idea that, at least Neelix has some discussion with the diplomatic squad there. And they're concerned, but by the way, this is also profitable. So I feel like there's some level of disconnect where they're trying, maybe as long as these visitors are only here for about 24 hours, well, let them enjoy the sport. Yeah, it's just a sport. Don't worry about it. It's just people wearing these glow sticks in their gloves and in their shoes. Now you go away. Don't worry about what happens later.
Yeah, I mean, you have this world that has all these, beetle larva exhibits, these beautiful beaches, all of these cultural accoutrements. And by the way, we also have gladiatorial combats to the death. I took that line when Neelix comes back and he's talking to them about, after speaking to the government, I took it to be Casablanca, right? I am shocked to determine that there is gambling.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Like, they totally know what's up. Everybody does. I just refuse to believe that the spectators didn't either. They had to have known. It's just, it couldn't have gone on for long enough until someone noticed what was going on. But I will say this. When it comes to techniques of being sinister, Hank, this guy has got it down to a science.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't come in with the hard demand, right? He comes in it can all be arranged, right? And the deal starts slowly. And this guy has escalation built in, right? Treat him and I will comply. That's how we start. Then we move on to the Hirogen. Teach me how to fight. Then it moves on after that, right? That is my prey. Kill or be killed. She's on the escalator.
Right.
And you see it in the episode, and it's all him pulling the strings, right? He knows what that Hirogen's up to. He knows what's up. You can see them connecting the dots to her going into that arena and killing that guy.
Well, let's talk about that then, because he is pulling those strings. He knows how to manipulate probably any number of people who have come through this training system and ended up in a Tsunkatse fight. So he knows what he's doing to Seven. Seven, every step of the way, she's got to compromise a little bit to get hopefully what she wants, which is to get out of there with Tuvok. But I thought of another episode. I thought of, from The Next Generation, The Most Toys.
Oh, okay.
And I thought about that moment where Data has got that gun pulled on Kivas Fajo and gets beamed away at the last second, just like Seven and our Hirogen get beamed away at the last second here. And in the most toys, we were left with this question. Okay, did Data almost probably just try to kill this guy to get away? And I came away from that thinking there's better than a 50% chance that Data was going to kill this guy. I wondered about Seven. And I wondered if maybe Seven was just a little more tempered here. Maybe we can't quite accept the idea that Seven would be compromised that much because look how far she's come. Look how disgusted she is by the things that she did in her past as a Borg drone. But it was close. It was close. Did you think even for a second that it was going to be a problem for Seven to not kill?
So I'm going to answer this by going around the mulberry bush, John.
Okay.
Have you seen or read the Dune movies and read the books?
Yeah, I haven't read the books, but I have seen the movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that scene where Paul is down on the planet with the Fremen, and he gets challenged by that Fremen fighter. And it's a battle to the death. Yeah. And in the book, they actually explain a lot more of the reason for this. That, like, when you're in an unknown situation, the test that you have to put to the situation is to test something until it actually breaks. Like, you can't do, like, a reasonable interpretation. What do we think is going to happen if we do this? No, you have to put it to the what they call the Amtal rule in the book. We got to put it until the thing breaks. So we have to have a battle to the death to determine if this guy is legit or not. Yeah. Now, again, I was going to take you around the mulberry bush. I did mention earlier that I was in the Navy. And I was in school before I went to my ship for 2.5 years. And you always talk about what it's going to be like out in the fleet. And you always ask, like, the guys who were, it was guys in my case. It was all men in the submarine fleet. You would always ask, and you would say, what's it like out in the fleet? Did you ever have a real casualty? Did you ever have to go into real combat? What was that like? And one of the lessons that I remembered getting from one of these, gray, quote unquote, graybeards was, you get these people who show up to the ship who know everything. And I mean, not like in a smarmy way. I mean, they know all their stuff they're supposed to know. They're all together. Right. They've got, anything you ask them, they know. They're up to date on the equipment, the procedures, the rules, the techniques, everything. Then you get these people who show up who are kind of screw-ups. And until they're actually in the casualty situation, you don't know how people are going to react. Yeah. And I remembered saying to myself, I am not going to prejudge anybody, right? You see that guy, you think that guy's a squared away sailor. He knows what's up. He knows what's going on. Until something actually happens, it's the Amtal rule. You got to put it to the actual test. You got to put them in the moment. Can they perform? Right. And I think that this is the Amtal rule that we didn't get to see it to completion. And I don't think Seven knows I think she was telling the truth when she says she didn't know what she was going to do. She'd have seen a knife sticking out of that guy and would have been surprised. Like, I just did that? Right? Yeah. I think she would have went for it, just my opinion, because she's on that escalator ride. When you look at her language, right? Oh, just treat him and I'll comply. Now teach me how to fight and I will comply, right? Now I want to kill him. She said the words. Yeah. She could have pulled back on that. She could have gone a little bit softer in that. But she's like, I'm going to kill my prey, right? Some version of that. Yeah. And because she's on that escalator and I clocked it, I think, man, she's on the escalator to the bad place right now. And I think she would have done it. But I think she would have been surprised by having done it.
So were there no other UPN shows worthy of Star Trek crossovers in the past? Have we forsaken Platypus Man and Shasta McNasty?
All right, we have faced off in the arena that is Mission Log. We have fought it out. And hopefully, this will not end in any fisticuffs. This will not end in any bruised egos. Well, maybe a bruised ego, but certainly not any physical bruises to take home. Now is the time on the show where we get to ask each other, did Tsunkatse hold up? And more importantly, what did we learn in the process? Are there morals, messages, meanings to take away from this particular episode of Star Trek? So, John, in the tradition of Mission Log, the does it hold up question purposely left to your own devices. There might be aspects that you love. There might be aspects that completely take you out of it and maybe ruin a perfectly good episode for you, or the other way around. So how about this one? Tsunkatse, does this hold up for you?
Well, this episode is like Neelix's buffet. There's a couple of things on offer, and you got to take your pick. You can sit down, and anyone can sit down and enjoy this episode as sort of, an enjoyable romp with some very fun fights and some cool shoot 'em up action. And the episode is fine. It is perfectly enjoyable at that level. For myself, with my own background and things that have happened in my life, which I've talked about here, I took something a lot deeper. So I didn't go for the Leola route. I went for the Jabalian omelet, a much heartier meal on this. I thought you'd appreciate that.
That was very good.
So I think it can be enjoyed on two different levels. And so whatever you're in the mood for, this episode is like on two different tracks. And both of them, I think, are satisfying in different ways. Yes, it holds up.
Great. All right. Excellent. I have to tell you, I thought about this immediately. I'm trying to kind of connect the dots. Like, where have I seen this idea before? Where have I grappled with this maybe moral or ethical question before? And a lot of it is Star Trek. A lot of that is in the worst sense derivative, but in the best sense, it just means that it is classic storytelling. And the comparative episodes that I thought of going back to TOS, Arena, for sure. In fact, at one point, this episode, I believe the working title was Arena, so they couldn't name it that. A Taste of Armageddon, because Seven has to absorb that message that Kirk says. It's like, yeah, we're barbarians, but we can choose not to kill today. That's what she's got to walk away with. And of course, you and I checked it earlier, Gamesters of Triskelion. There's definitely some DNA from that show here. And I have to admit that watching this again now, after many years. I didn't see it when it originally aired, but I did see it in a rewatch some years later. It held up way better than I thought it would. Because I thought, look, I'm just getting to the episode with The Rock, and it's this ratings crossover stunt. And it might all be that. But here's the thing. It shot really well. The guest stars are great. And because that story is cut from the same cloth as all those classic Trek episodes, it just sort of feels at home in a way. It doesn't feel cheap and recycled. It just feels like, well, we're supposed to be here with this kind of story in Star Trek. Now, I think you can kind of tell from a production point of view that they were hedging their bets a bit with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Oh, yeah.
He's not given a lot to do. Other than what he was already doing, which is you show up, you raise the eyebrow, you throw a few punches, and then you're gone. I remembered him as being a bigger part of this episode than he actually was. But look, in the years since then, he has come into his own as a performer and a personality. He was very likable, and now he's headlining huge movies, and good on him. And in this case, I feel like the production then is relying on two of their tried and true guest stars with Jeffrey Combs and J.G. Hertzler, and those are both great choices because they deliver exactly as expected. They're both wonderful in this. So, yeah, look, while it's not covering any new ground, it is produced really well. It's very satisfying for Seven's overall character arc. Like, this is the kind of thing that we have to drive home frequently, but this is all part of her journey. How do you reclaim one's humanity? Well, it might be in all these various aspects. One of those will be in this experience of remorse and guilt and regret, and here she is experiencing all of that. And it also works because this is an episode, very much to your point, you can just kick back and have fun with it. That's perfectly acceptable here, too. So however you choose to enjoy it, you can. Before we recorded, I said something about maybe this doesn't have the deepest morals, meanings, messages. Maybe everything that we need to get out of it is right there on the surface. But I think that's okay, too. Because I think that there are angles that you can explore here. I think there is a very relevant angle, particularly now with this story, given our thirst for conflict on social media. People are making a grab for ratings. Yeah, they were doing it in 2000, but now there are so many more media opportunities and so many other ways for people to try to grab your attention. And usually it's with the kind of content that appeals to the worst in people. And that's partly what's happening here. There is this important lesson in compassion. And maybe here we have a classic mission log bonk bonk on the head message. We know the ethical dilemma that faces Seven. She's got to survive for herself and for Tuvok, but she also doesn't want to kill. She doesn't want to be forced into the situation. But like you said, she's on that escalator. She keeps getting pushed and she keeps compromising. One more step, one more step, one more step. So can she find a clever, creative way out and survive with her dignity, survive with her own sense of ethics and morality? Now, for Kirk, I'll refer you back to Arena. For Kirk, he wasn't going to kill the Gorn, and the Metreon showed up and they rewarded him for his choice. And Seven didn't really finally get to make that choice.
Right.
There's a bit of deus ex machina here, right, with the transporter. But she was conflicted, and she got the most important message in the end, which is to absorb and live with guilt and remorse, and more importantly, the compassion that she needs to have to be more human. And I think we all need to tap into our compassion and our sense of empathy now more than ever. So how about with you, John?
Well, I completely agree with you that compassion is in short supply and is critically needed today for everybody in the world. Just a little bit more love and compassion would do us all a world of good. But I also agree that this episode is derivative in a lot of ways. But, John, I know you love food talk. I would say that it's a little bit like, why would anyone ever have a hamburger? We've all had a million of them. But you get to that point where it's just made just exactly the way you want it, and just everything just aligns. Yeah. And you eat that thing and you're like, this might be the 10,000th hamburger I've had, and it was so satisfying, and I would do again. Yeah. I think this episode is like that. Yes, it has this stuff we've all seen before, but they did it so well, it's satisfying. Now, I took maybe a little bit different message from it than you did, which is that it's a cautionary tale. You who are listening to this, you who see yourself as kind and compassionate, you could be turned if you let external forces act upon you in the way that Penk was acting upon Seven. She was on the path.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something that she is going to have to struggle with. And I think that is part of what goes into the mix of someone's psyche, is to look back and to say, I think I was going to do it. I don't know. I don't know if I was going to do it. I think I would have surprised myself with what I did or didn't do, but I think I was going to do it. Am I okay with that? Was it the right thing to do? And thank the heavens I was saved from having to actually carry through. I don't know what's worse, knowing or not knowing. Yeah. But I think that cautionary tale is something that we should take from this episode. And it is something that I thought about for quite a number of minutes after turning it off and just contemplating my thoughts as I was preparing to do this episode with you.
Well said, John. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Collective.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Tsunkatse. Is the rock igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic? Did anyone run a tricorder over this guy to find out? Or did we just not do science this week? End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.